Hello, Mr. Gerken.
Hi.
How are you today? How do you feel in Zagreb? Do you like Zagreb? Is it comfortable for you?
Yeah, I feel very good having seen a few clients in the morning. I like to go out. The weather is beautiful. And I come here for over 15 years. And I'm always lovely to come here. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with my questions. You are teaching at universities worldwide as a pioneer of core evolution technique, including your experience. Could you explain the relationship between our mind, our body, and our soul?
Yeah, so it's a very complex relation, of course. And for that to go a little bit into the deeper understanding from my work and my research, we got to understand that we have sensations that move in our system, where they become emotions that mean our reaction to our sensations. And when we experience our emotions in a certain setting, we turn them into feelings, and when we call them feelings. And sensations, emotions, and feelings, and our brain capacity to formulate, that allows mind to emerge. That means mind is not just an intellect or thinking. Mind is a whole perception of our being. So in that way, I see that a little bit larger than only intellectual capacity. Then, of course, the body, as you already become aware, is the vehicle for our experience in this life. This gives us the capacity to also develop mind, and when I talk about mind, then that is our capacity to develop consciousness, that we can then connect with a larger consciousness of existence that goes a little bit far into quantum physics, but we have to go there. That's our participatory consciousness that I call. So body is a whole structure that we develop. We come with very malleable, and then our experiences in life, of course, let us structure ourselves. We structure our feelings and our experiences. And then what you call soul is for me more our essence, our essential being. Since I work in many cultures in various countries, or in the Buddhist sense, so they are not all having the meaning of soul. So for me, that's why in my work I express it as essence, that we bring, that we then develop further in our life. So soul or essence more understood as a process of life and unfolding. So that's, in a nutshell, the whole gestalt that we are, right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Modern way of living implies so many challenges, you know that. We are pushing our emotions deep down, we can't handle or recognize our feelings. What will be first step to stand in our lives, to take control? How really I can realize my potential and stop limiting myself?
Yeah, that's...
It's complex
yeah,
too.
Right. As I mentioned it, so that could be in 1 hour lecture,
yeah,
but I see how I can bring it again in a nutshell. So, pushing down is one of the principles we do. We have many ways of dealing with our emotions and feelings. We could split off, we could stay and disconnect from them, we push them down. So we go above them and don't become aware of them. We have a spiritual escape and don't become aware of them. And then, of course, society offers so beautiful, wonderful distractions from our being, that where we can go into consumerism and look at that. But all is the question, how authentic can we be? How much can we stay in contact, what I call, with our original being, which is represented in our pulsation of life. And when I talk about pulsation of life, then I mean pulsation. That means our heartbeat, our cellular existence, our being. And that already implies how can we reconnect with this pulsation. You see, when you say pushing down, everybody who pushes feelings down has a limited breathing. So when we invite a person to a little more increase in breathing, the person comes more into connection with their feelings. I was almost preparing to show you a few pictures from my PowerPoint where you can see in my infrared research, where you see when somebody holds the energy in time, and we can make pictures of that because in the infrared you have the feeling of the warm radiance of the body. And what does it need to begin again energy that is stuck to bring it into movement? And then when movement takes place, energy flows. When energy flows, the story flows. That means what has the person experienced and what are you experiencing now? And then we are already in the middle of, I wouldn't say treatment, but in the middle of exploration, you know, of where we are. And with that, of course, then it becomes more a choice. What is still very protective and what do you need to maybe regulate and control, and where can you open up control and just be more authentic, come more into life and have more joy, direct joy, you know.
Before joy, depression, anxiety, many other disorders, so many alcohol, drugs. We are living in that kind of world.
Yeah.
How deep trauma can paint my life in black or dark color? How important trauma is to understand trauma?
I mean, these days we're living in a time where the notion of trauma is so prevalent as in all teaching. We hear of personal trauma, developmental trauma, shock trauma that you experience just by car accident or by operation or so. We hear of family trauma, generational trauma, collective trauma. So all this kind of...
So many traumas.
Yeah, national trauma, you know, every country almost has. We use that word trauma very wildly these days, you know. The definition in psychology and in medicine is more when we penetrate the skin. In psychology, it's more when the system has an experience that cannot be integrated and stays. Then it has a traumatic potential. And to the degree that your system cannot integrate it, your nervous system and your whole, as I call it, body-mind field, cannot integrate it, to that degree then it becomes the trauma. So there is a fixed definition for it, but that only accounts for countries where you have insurances, then we have time frames, and I know you don't have that definition fixed, but you have it as a definition of trauma. So understanding that is an overwhelming force that the system cannot deal with, we become aware of what can we do to ease a person's load of stress, and that stress pattern then is prevalent, of course, in certain brain condition, you know. Just briefly, we talk then about the amygdala and the limbic system, that is our emotional system, that gets overloaded and cannot make sense anymore of the experience. You don't know anymore from where, when, what happened, and so on. So we need to integrate that little by little by little. And then, of course, we have the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland axis, which results in the emission of cortisol as a stress hormone and adrenaline. So, knowing about that cycle, we know, hey, we gotta bring in a greater, what we call grounding. More grounding as a sense of coming back to my roots, coming back into myself. Breathing, having a sense of who I am, I can function. So, and that is for us visible. That means I have a good circulation. My skin color has a good tone. My muscle have a good tone, you know. I can make contact with you. My eyes have an energy. In a depressed person, you mostly see there's not anymore the energy, it's more, a little bit more fearful. So I can communicate, I can be present, I can be here, and all this is what I call in my work self-empowerment and mindful presence, you know. So that is what we need to bring in. And in terms of the question of depression, Well, I have a certain expression, and that you can memorize very easily, that the repression of expression can cause depression. And very often, it's 99% when I work with clients of depression, I always look for what is not lived, what is not expressed, what they could not express in childhood and what they don't do now, you know. This morning again, I had a client who always wanted to be a musician, but rather studied something else, what the parents wanted or what gave a job, etc., you know. So in this moment then we got to see what is the impact it has on the person. Sometimes it has no impact, but sometimes it has a deep impact on the person not realizing themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's what you also ask, how can I realize my potential? For that I need to come back in contact with myself and possibly also connect with what I call an inner compass, you know, an inner compass that you connect with and says, this is what I want to do in life. And then you become
the first question.
Yeah, and that it's by nature you feel there is a flow, there is a happening, as we call it, you know. And
this is joy.
Joyful. Joy. That brings again joy, right? Yeah.
What about anxiety?
Anxiety. Well, we need to specify the question a little bit more. In what moment, you know?
Generally speaking,
if you see a good-looking man, anxiety, or
that kind.
Or if you meet a tiger, you know?
Yeah.
So then we have different issues. So, but in general, we got to see we are living with life impulses. Da, da, da. And normally they flow into life, you know. And life impulse can come and it can go into excitement about life. Or if that is becoming a threat, then it goes into anxiety. And then I have to find out, what is the anxiety about? Is it rooted in psychodynamic moments that you had in your family, in your society, in your school? How early does it begin? And how is it expressed? So why is not so much important in my work than, it is important later for the integration, but it's more what happens, and where, and when, and with whom. And then we understand the why much better, you know. So, and then we can lead the person into not only an understanding, but into a new experience. And that experience, as I call it, becomes a reference system that they feel, yes, there I feel more in myself, there I feel more I can connect and come into presence with you, I can meet you, I can meet the world, and in that moment I don't need to have the anxiety. I mean, I work with people who have stage fright, artists or things like that, you know. So anxiety can have many forms where the life impulse is not just a flow. So we can bring it back into the flow of life.
Usually when I have a client or whatever, the first question is how many years, how many sessions, how many support I need for transformation, for better and easier life?
Well,
you already heard questions like that.
Not really, yeah. Some clients ask that, of course. I mean, being for 50 years in this field and working, I must admit sometimes it's one session and the person has opened the cork and then the champagne can flow. So in general, of course, it's a process, you know. And as you know from other trainings, they go 3-4 years. That depends on the basis of the person, of the consciousness, the development, and then also how deep the person wants to go. And I learned to accept any opening is good, and whenever the person feels, that's how far I want to go, to acknowledge that, to accept it. It's not necessarily that I call it resistance, I call it a certain caution, a protection. But if you really want to explore, in the way I expressed it, it's a lifelong exploration. In terms of therapy or in terms of protection, you go for 3-4 years and for sure you see then the change. I mean, when I come in my 1-year class or come in my 5th-year class, you already feel, oh, wow, here we can work, you know. In the first year, I got to move the train, you know. So that is the natural unfolding, you know. But as I said, I travel in the world. I do sessions with people who just call me or that I meet, and then we got to see, you have a lot of life experience, but you may come and say, you know what, I have a very specific question that I want to solve in my life, you know. It's not about that I want therapy for years. I have a certain life issue I want to look at, you know. Life changes or whatever, you know. And then sometimes you only need one more moment of exploration to come into the next phase of your life until you hit a point again where you feel that I would like to have a deeper exploration about, you know. So I don't fixate that anymore by time, but if you talk in regular therapy and you live here and you have a therapist, I would look at 3-4 years and possibly...
Changes will come.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. So at least working in body-oriented, mindfulness-centered and psychodynamic work, change will come, because the change of breathing, the change of connection with your own body, the change of allows you to see the world in different ways, and you move in different ways. So that's a moment of change, you know, yeah.
Last but not least, love is the biggest power for humanity. What the love is? What do you think? What the love actually is, and how love can help us?
Well, I have a whole lecture about that, but for that you got to see, I describe love as a resonance with the flow of life. With that I take it out of all romantic ideas, out of all philosophies, because love, like many terms, like God, spirit and so on, are larger than life, you know. So, but if we take it down and see what is love, I guide people, sometimes even in a lecture, with hundreds of people. I guide them into a state through short experience, where they experience a state where they feel, oh, that is what I normally describe as love. Now I can address that. I have love for you, I have love for him, I have love for my camera, or I have love for my tea, or whatever, you know, I love my children. But this is all adjectives. We put adjectives to the term, which is a flow, which is a resonance to life. And that is when we live this, then we become aware that we cannot or never become destructive anymore with ourselves or with others. Because we become aware when we when we betray the principle of life, when we betray the principle of love, then we stop that flow. We have negative thoughts. We wish something would happen negative to the other person, and not, I feel in the resonance of life. In that state, I can call it, I'm in a state of love. And I include you in that state. It becomes different when I say, I love you. Then it comes on a social and interactive level.
It's not usual question.
No, it's not usual question, but we got to address it and see what is that. And when you take it as a flow, as a resonance with the flow of life, then we have a criteria. Because if I hold my breath and tell my lover, I love you, then I have an idea about love. I'm not in myself, I'm not in the embodiment of love, embodiment of the resonance. And that is where it's healing for the world, from that aspect, not in the romantic idea. Because we kill for gods, we kill for this and doing that, you know, and all of a sudden it gets so distorted. But if I bring it back, I feel that in the beauty of flow in myself, and from that place I understand your own beauty in yourself. That's where we can say, love your neighbor as yourself, you know. So, and in that, as I said, in that moment you are not destructive with yourself and with others, and that is the healing for the world.
How many years I need for that kind of feelings and thinking about love?
If you have some time afterwards, we can just do it maybe in a half an hour.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's do it.
With that asking and knowing that it's a public question here, it is also the question of light and dark, because you ask a question of darkness and light and so on. And that's the age-old question. So, I mean, that's the question that Hollywood has in their movies, you know. So how much light do they need to have to be in the dark or penetrate the dark? Then I can always say for thousands of years this has been the question. How can we bring more light into people's body? And that is my message that I come from and for which I work.
But important is it's possible.
Absolutely.
It's very possible.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't do this work for over 50 years if I wouldn't see that almost daily in my work. And so in that respect, yeah, that's my encouragement. Absolutely.